Welcome to Money Matters with Greg, where we dive into the money conversations shaping your life. From investments to estate planning, insurance to taxes, we cover it all with a fresh perspective. Join Greg and his guests each week to get inspired and take control of your financial future. Let's get started. Securities and investment advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor. Member FINRA SIPC.
All right, good afternoon. The show's Money Matters with Greg. I'm Greg Farrell, CEO and owner of Farrell Wealth. It's a wealth management firm in Valparaiso, Indiana. And the show is about money. We have a number of different things on the show that we talk about. We're in our 191st episode. Very excited about this. We're on WVLP 103.1 FM, broadcasting at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Thursdays and at 3 o'clock on Saturdays on a replay. And then you can find us anywhere we pod or anywhere you pod, Apple, Spotify, you name it. We have on this show many guests that we're very lucky to have today. A guest, I want to mention the one disclaimer that I always seem to forget is the opinions voiced in this show are general information only and not intended for to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies and investments are suitable for you, consult your appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. Third-party guests are not affiliated with LPL Financial or Farrell Wealth. That should help my compliance department very much so. I'd like to introduce Matt Voss, who's president of Near Launch Space, and we want to talk space on this show. So Matt, welcome.
Thank you for having me here. I appreciate the time, Greg. I'm excited to hear think about all of these matters with you.
Excited to have you on today and really appreciate it. Matt and I met through the Goldman Sachs cohort. We were both cohorts in the Indiana cohort through the Goldman Sachs 10K If you want to learn more about that program and what that means and how that was and the PTSD that both Matt and I have from going through that process, I think neither of us would have joined if we knew how much work was involved. But I know it made us both better business owners and business people. And if you want to learn more about that, there is a pod on that, as well as on the YouTube channel. You can learn more about what the 10KSB is. But again, Matt, it's a thrill to have you on. I want to mention the Near Space Launch, and you go to nearspacelaunch.com to find you and learn more about Matt. For the listeners, it was started by his dad, Dr. Hank Voss, who was the chief scientist, and Jeff Daly, I believe, the chief engineer, and now Matt is president and running the show here in Upland, Indiana. So it's a great Indiana story. Do you want to tell the audience kind of like a little bit about what is Near Space and what you guys do?
Yeah, no, I'd be glad to share about it and had a great time with you there at Goldman Sachs programs. And so Near Space Launch is a small satellite manufacturer. Grew out of Taylor University about 12 years ago, working with, as you mentioned, Hank and Jeff Daly there, and working with building small satellites for students and kind of working in that area. So a lot of times, traditionally, you think of satellites, you think of the larger ones that are the size of a car almost. These are smaller ones. So as technology is getting smaller, like your cell phone, you're able to shrink those down and really do some really cool nanotechnology. So instead of paying for a multi-million, $100 million satellite, you can do a lot of great things at a smaller CubeSat is what we call those. And so from that, we did our first Indiana satellite. That was back in 2014. And with that mission success, it spun off a Near Space Launch. And so with that, we worked with other universities and helped them build their satellites. Then it moved into commercial and then doing some small business innovation grants, and then moved into actually building out full satellites for commercial, then government projects. And now we have over 100 satellites on orbit, over 1,000 systems and subsystems on orbit. Launching off, we just had 3 launch off last week for a DoD mission there called Spear 1 that we're talking with right now. So it's been an exciting journey over the last decade, projects and challenges. And the industry has definitely transformed drastically from year to year.
Yeah, that was one of the questions I have for you is how have things, obviously we see the headlines with SpaceX, and that, has hit the front page for a lot of people and realize that space actually is obtainable. Like, what are you seeing as far as the changes, the key innovations, sort of the trends?
There's a lot of neat things, new capabilities coming on. I think it's been one of the new space ages that a lot of the people generations have said this is a new space generation that's coming aboard. And really, the architecture has changed. I think there's been a lot more of hybrid architecture designed through both the NASA and Space Force governments, where they're starting to allow new players to enter the space industry and to help and contribute. A lot of the traditional terrestrial projects and technologies, there was a gap between what was being utilized in space and what's being used terrestrially, and really just bringing both of those areas and domains together in a more faceted and rapid development stage. And so traditionally, it took a long time to create a technology, custom technology, and put that on orbit. Now it's becoming a more of a rapid turnaround of taking an idea, prototyping it, putting it on orbit, and testing it out. And I think SpaceX has been one of the leading space company that has really helped show iterational development and pushing up from their Falcon 9s to now their Starship and Starlink and all the different projects they're working on, as far as getting 80% there and then challenging to move it forward the needle in iterational growth. And that's really transformed the community and the space community via how they approach and move technology to orbit.
And ultimately, doesn't it save people money?
It does. Yeah. I mean, that's instead of building a custom thing for every single solution, we're talking about manufacturing. And so really that's how we are here in Indiana. Indiana is known for manufacturing and one of the fastest growing. I think as it's showing the seriousness of the space industry, starting to really want to see scale of these projects and not a unique custom 10-year project, launch one satellite. Really, the constellations is what a lot of the space conferences are talking about. And really, how do you make it affordable to bring this up? So the launch has usually been one of the most expensive constraints. And now, it's a lot more affordable to go to orbit. So space is becoming accessible to a lot more people and looking to be involved in space. And so it's not just from investment side, but also from just a lot more people have access to go to orbit. And that's makes a lot of new opportunities and innovations and solutions to solve problems.
Awesome. I see on the website, if you check out the website, you see a lot of the different a lot of customers, people you've helped. I mean, you've worked with NASA and you work with MIT and obviously Space Force and a number of other groups. But you also work with universities, and many of them are Indiana based. Can you talk to that as to how you've helped the different universities in the state of Indiana?
Yeah, no, it's a strong passion for our team. Most of us have been teachers or professors at one point. And so as we grew more into our commercial and government projects, we realized we were doing less partnerships with our academic partners. So we stood up in 2020 around COVID. Great time to stand up a nonprofit for education. So we started exactly. But it was a great time to incubate that because we saw a demand and request of students to be involved in going to space. So Near Space Education is our 501(c)(3) that stands up basically helping build satellites with a STEM satellite for students. And so we called the Dream Big program. And so we just did our phase 1, completed a full process here with other manufacturers here in the Midwest to help fund it. Completely done by Indiana, where we launched on a SpaceX mission 6 satellites built here in Northeast Indiana and also the surrounding tri-state, Michigan and Ohio. And so it was Valparaiso being one of the schools. Congratulations. Your city there got to launch a satellite here on Transporter 16 in March of this year, 2026, along with Notre Dame, Western Michigan, the University of Toledo, Purdue, Fort Wayne, and Taylor City. And so that worked with over 2,000 students, just showing the accessibility of space that, K through 12 are doing high-altitude balloons. University students are actually building stuff going to orbit and doing that only in 1 year. Because traditionally, if you try to build something again, that usually took 4 to 5 years. Students didn't get to see the whole cycle. And that was really a neat proof of accessibility to space. And these students are testing things that they thought of as experience that'd be valuable to the community for what to test on orbit.
That's really cool. Along those lines, you guys have space camps. Do you want to talk to that as to how someone might get involved to be able to learn more about you? Go visit Upland. I know it's a mecca, the mecca of Upland, Indiana.
That's right.
Right.
So we're right between Fort Wayne and Indianapolis in a small rural town here in Indiana. So it shows, you can do these from anywhere now. So we're top 3,000. But yeah, we're leading space camps now here for our nonprofit. They created across the street here a maker space with an innovation hub. Right now they're doing Girls in STEM week here with overnights. Students coming all the way from Europe to Florida and coming here to develop spacecraft. And students get to work in clean rooms, build out high-altitude balloon launches that go to the top 1% of the atmosphere that are going to launch it this week and chase it and recover those balloons and just really learn a lot of neat from programming to soldering to a lot of the capabilities of engineers that we use for our commercial side are the same ones that students are getting exposed to in a fun way. And so We're hopefully, a lot of things that I wish we had when we were kids. They're getting to work on those, and it's a pretty fun group over there that they're doing.
I can imagine. That's super cool. I just love what you're doing for kids and have the opportunity to be able to learn something that, wouldn't necessarily be able to do. You make a really good point with building a satellite, and it's going to be a 5-year launch. Like you graduate before you get to see it. Now things have sped up.
That's right. You can actually do the whole engineering process, even to do the data review. And you learn by failure too. So a lot of them never get to see their own failures. And that's a lot from how we all learn throughout time. That's part of that iterational growth. But hopefully with a little bit of a manufacturer that can come alongside a nonprofit and kind of give a full cycle of how to develop these students and really just teach first principles. So that, SpaceX and Elon Musk talks about how do we teach first principles that, this world's going to change a lot from, all the other fun big words like AI they talk about or tech development, vastly changing landscape. How can we keep that baseline of knowledge to build off of with all these other different tools we're given pretty rapidly for the tech world?
Very, very cool. On you mentioned the 501c side and the nonprofit side. What about the for-profit side? Like, who's using you guys technology-wise? What companies? How are they using you to become, better businesses?
Yeah, it's been used for a couple different reasons. Originally, one of the big things when you go to space is before you go on a bigger mission, you want to make sure your stuff is working well, or you want to make sure you're testing things out well. So we did a lot of experimental missions at first, where we help people go to space for the first time and test out their equipment, make sure it's fully functional, give it 2 years of flight heritage. You want to make sure it's operating for a while before it gets integrated into a more critical mission of operation, such as GPS or some of the larger space weather satellites that we depend on greatly for our society today, and from national security and areas like that. So we've worked with 100 different space customers over the years. Some of them were startups. Some of them are larger primes from that are out there, to a lot of our government agencies, like you mentioned earlier, NASA and Space Force contracts here. We did a lot of experimental, but one of the areas Near Space is growing into a lot right now is commercial projects, which really matches up with what the market is saying we need, is constellation support. And so there's a lot of this time of technology being developed now. There's a need for constellations. And so we're doing alternate PNT, which is, our GPS satellites are fantastic. They've been supporting when we're all trying to drive around and find our maps and locations. We depend on it more and more as we work on our technologies and so many different platforms. That technologies that we take for granted a lot of times, but it's really becoming a critical infrastructure backbone. And so building other constellations is one of the demand, is to diversify that demand from one satellite or several satellites, constellations, in order to more dispersed. And that's what I mentioned earlier, was a hybrid architecture. And so there's a demand to really spread that out and make it more reliable through other networks. And so we're building some of those constellations for some of our partners right now. There's additional space weather. I mean, I just mentioned GPS or PNT, the very low Earth orbit. So a lot of satellites, like the International Space Station, is what we call in low Earth orbit. Then you have MEO and then GEO, which the GEO ones are where you have a stationary over your Earth. The LEO ones is a very interesting area. That's where Starlink is, and SpaceX sends all their satellites. That gets you lower latency, which means you can talk quicker with your connection to your Wi-Fi or to other things if they're closer to the satellites closer to Earth. Also means you might burn up quicker and you re-enter into the atmosphere. But one of the things to think about for the LEO is there's also called a VLEO, very low Earth orbit. It's where a lot of our atmosphere is. It's where our high altitude balloons go up and burst, because that's where the atmosphere really stops. It's a tough region to get good data on. This is where small satellites are very important, because we want to really study that region, because that will distort or affect a lot of our communications, our satellite information going between that field of information there. And so we're trying to, near space, collect some of that data on reentry. And so some of our smaller technologies can afford to go through that region and collect that data and provide it to the community.
Fascinating. Very, very cool, man. Appreciate
Hopefully
it.
that's helpful.
It's awesome. It's really fun. Real quick, the show's Money Matters with Greg. I'm Greg Farrell, CEO and owner of Farrell Wealth. It's a wealth management firm and financial advising firm here in Valparaiso, Indiana, serving clients in 25 states. We're definitely all over the nation. Talking on this show, Money Matters with Greg, about money. And today we're very excited to have on 103.1 FM BVLP as well, broadcasted Thursday at 1 and then Saturday at 3, and anywhere you pod as well. You can find us, just search Money Matters with Greg. We're having Matt Voss, president of Near Launch, today talk about space and I just really appreciative to have you on. I wanted to talk and sort of go the consumer route. And since we talk money on this show, I don't think people realize you mentioned GPS and how much we might take it for granted in, the Wazes of the world. And, there's a traffic jam and that affects your life that moment. There's a crash or, an accident on a roadway and your family vacation is interrupted. That might be certainly one way as far as convenience goes. But as far as cost wise, like how does space and how do the satellites help? And one of the things I think of in the world that we live in is property casualty in regards to someone having a second home, let's say, or, a third home, wherever it might be affected by a storm. Talk to us about like how we as consumers sort of miss a mark or don't really understand how much space is actually affecting or helping us with, let's say, our farming, with our businesses, you name it. Can you go into some about that?
Yeah, I'm glad to. So, there's several areas that we can help with the better farming, disaster recovery, moving from all those different aspects, better accurate weather forecasting. So I think you kind of mentioned at the top of that, I'm really thinking about how do we track our hurricanes, our tornadoes, flooding, wildfires, drought. There's a lot of talk at conferences, how do we can track that, see where it's growing and really actually save lives to get out of certain events that could be occurring soon. There's also the wildfires really starting to track when something starts. We can detect it a lot earlier if it's deeper out there. So I won't speak like I'm a strong subject matter expert in all these different subjects. Once again, a broad nature space, but that is definitely been proven to, and the more lower latency and sensors looking at those things, the more accurate and the better forecasting you can have for those. So I think there's a desire for more sensors and more information for the models to have that. And that's one of the areas a lot of groups are trying to help solve. I think also for farming, that kind of goes in the same kind of thing. We need more sensors to kind of monitor crop health. There's a lot of great sensors. When they fly over, they can detect a lot of neat things of how the health of across the state section or region, and kind of regional and needs and agriculture. So there's a lot of great things that Purdue's working on and other places as far as looking from the space domain across sections of farming of what's happening and communicating that data then to everybody and doing a job in monitoring crop health. And I think disaster response, I think, we mentioned this before, Starlink and other groups are putting on communication on orbit. So if your whole network crashes, you can always reconnect quickly through a network on disaster reliefs and location of isolated communities, beacons. So if they have Iridium is a group that we work with closely, we're one of ours to really identify if someone is lost. And so they save multiple lives every week, a lost hiker because of a satellite connection to those. So it's definitely a thing that's reducing risk, which I know is critical for many, but we really need to increase environmental monitoring. So air quality. So there's just a long list of things that space is doing. And as it gets better, as we invest technologies into it, it can do a lot more monitoring of safety for different groups there.
Awesome. And specifically, do you think about, farming wise, that's, knowing that it's going to be a rainy season or knowing that, the prediction is I can use maybe less fertilizer. I can maybe have less water, all of these things that matter. And then in the commodity side, as far as pricing, like that helps pricing corn, soybeans, you name it, as far as crops. Are you guys still doing the iStar radios, the small satellites that are really make things a little bit more affordable too? Is that?
So one of the issues is as industries mature, if you think of the airplane industry, the aerospace industry, where the planes are first flying, they didn't really have ways to detect where the planes were located as well. They didn't have, it wasn't until something's crashed, unfortunately, that they really started setting up ground station networks that really monitored and also beacons that were on these planes. And it's kind of really we're moving past a lot of the early development. Even in this last 10 years, you asked how we're changing. Really, there has to be almost an infrastructure of the space industry and ecosystem that we've witnessed. And so one of the areas that Airspace is helping is what you just mentioned, the iStar radio. We have over 250 of those on orbit. We, instead of trying to build our own constellation, sometimes we say, let's connect to pre-existing ones with the radio. And it allows almost like what we call the black box on these satellites. And so you can actually identify where these satellites are located and send that through what they call Iridium and Globalstar, but basically giving a real-time communication, because just a reminder or a thought is that these satellites are traveling at 17,000 miles per hour. They're going around the Earth multiple times a day. So they're moving fast. And so how can we really track these satellites and keep the information, like the infrastructure for the airplane industry that, as we add more satellites, there's a lot of space in space, but, we're sending up, the projection is to send a lot more satellites in space with these sensors and capabilities and communications. How can they all interact and be on orbit together? We really need to have a better black box or a device to put those connected in. So we're trying to adopt some of the stuff that the aerospace plane industry had, the boating industry, and bring that to the space domain. As that really infrastructure is growing and really starting to build out.
Yeah.
So that's one of the areas that we're helping is for black boxes for a spacecraft.
Awesome. Along with the industry that's growing, what are your thoughts on the data centers and the ability to be able to actually launch data centers and not have to have them on Earth? They don't water up there, coolant. They don't need, they don't need to be cooled. Everything's done. I mean, it is cooled, right? So what are your thoughts about that as far as potential?
Yeah, I mean, I will not be a subject matter expert in this again.
Right.
I'll speak as a junior whilst there. And I haven't researched the data centers and what they all require. They definitely have some neat things. It definitely is cooling. There's a lot of things that they get to work on. I know SpaceX is trying to solve that, and other groups. You definitely need a lot more power. So they're going to need to take a lot of area to power up their systems. So it'll definitely be a different way of looking at what spacecrafts could look like on orbit to be able to pull that data. And so I'm interested in tracking it with you all from the launch capability. I will say the space industry is a lot more set up for that than it used to be with, as the Starship and other groups are coming online, if those play into it. But I think time will tell here, and I'm not unfortunately going to have a strong statement for any of those, but it definitely is worth looking at to put a data center on orbit.
Awesome. Well, thank you for all that. Is there anything that you want the listeners to know as we wrap up here, just about what's going on, or, certainly ways to be able to reach out to Near Space, and who you guys are?
I think, a message I think that we like to share is space is accessible. It's not just made for a certain area. It's a smaller community that's rapidly growing. It's been just fun to see each of the conferences exponentially growing over the last 10 years and watching how people can get involved. And so I think there's this becoming more and more of the larger Fortune 500 companies are starting to build space strategies. And so just starting to think about how does companies think that way and what kind of value adds could be brought there. Is there technologies that could be adapted for use? There's a lot of funding for dual use technology and bringing that to orbit. And just joining the space ecosystem is a possible avenue. So we help a lot of groups do that through our experimental missions. It's glad to creative ideas on orbit. We won't share all those that we've got to work with. But I think also really investing in the next generation. We're in a big need for STEM teaching of our kids and the next generation. So obviously we're very passionate about that in Near Space Education, our nonprofit. So thanks for bringing that up, Greg, and asking about that. So that's definitely very passionate to see that we give the tools to the next generation as well, because they'll be here in the next 5-10 years. So,
do you have space camp for adults?
There you go. Well, we're thought about it. That's been a request to do a dual camp where their kids and adults can go. Maybe we'll have to do straight up adults at some point soon. So it's time to hang out. So
we know as good parents that we are, it's best to drop the kids off though.
That's right. We'll drop the kids off at a different place and we can do space.
Well done. The show's Money Matters with Greg Farrell, CEO and owner of Farrell Wealth. We talk money on this show today. We're very, very thankful to have Matt Voss, president of Near Space Launch, right? It's NSL, right?
Got it.
Yep. And so you can find them at nearspacelaunch.com. Just excited to have you on, Matt. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me on. Great chatting with you about the space industry together.
Yeah. Look forward to catching up soon. To the audience, thanks for being here, and we'll catch you on the next one. I hope you were able to learn something today and maybe some way to be able to find some money here on WVLP 103.1 FM. Also anywhere you pod. We'll certainly catch you on the next episode. We'll see you. Thanks again, Matt.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Money Matters with Greg. We hope you gained some valuable insights today. Remember, your financial journey is personal, but you don't have to go it alone. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe and share. Until next time, here's to making your money work for you. Securities and investment advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor. Member FINRA SIPC.